Aiden, thank you for talking with me today.
Hey, how you doing, Michael?
This is an arresting film. Is the best way that I can think of. It is so um, affecting. And my first question is, what are your influences as a filmmaker? Um, you
Ooh, that's a great question, but also thank you for saying that about the film. Yeah, I think for this film specifically, I pulled a lot from the work of Bong Joon-ho, which is where I actually got the idea for. Initially, it was supposed to all be one shot, now it's two shots, but um, yeah, that slow push-in was actually an idea I got while I watched Memories of Murder. There's a scene in a karaoke bar, and the whole scene is just the camera slowly dollying in. That I pulled a lot from that for this film. And yeah, it really depends on the movie, but recently a lot of it's been Edward Yang and diving into his work and Bong Joon Ho and yeah, I'm a big fan of a lot of Asian cinema and that's definitely influenced a lot of my work recently. But I'm a big fan of like American classic directors like Spielberg and Scorsese too. And
right.
I think that there's like that feed loop of influence because it goes Kurosawa, then like all those directors from the '70s and then back. So I think yeah, I'm a big fan of that lineage, I guess.
I mean, we're talking about Asian influences. We're kind of, I think, in a moment where we're being kind of spoiled by access to Asian cinema, especially South Korean movies, really seem to have found an audience in North America, which is great because it's always been there and they've always been fantastic. And to see that accessible to a larger audience, we actually have two South Korean films in our festival this year. So, like you say, the camera, it's kind of a one shot. You're slowly pushing in the entire time, but in a way that's almost imperceptible. Um, and because of that, it creates a tone in the film that is as much suspense thriller as it is raw human drama. What was your process for developing the style and tone of the film?
Um, well, I think it's I don't know if this is the best answer, but it's the honest one. Is it felt right for the movie,
Mm.
as simple as that sounds, and um, I just felt it added a level of because we start out so far and get closer slowly. I felt like it was a natural way to kind of get into the conversation. Just as like the conversation keeps getting more intimate, we're also getting more intimate with the character. But also, you're right. The tension aspect of it was intentional. We wanted to because you never know, especially with these type of scenarios, who's on the other end of that phone. Um, and sometimes they are, they can be dangerous people. So I wanted that to be an aspect of it. That not saying that they usually are anything, but this character is kind of a stranger to our lead character, so I wanted to make sure that was an element in there. And I do feel that this kind of omniscient camera is slowly moving in where you barely notice. It does have like a subconscious effect where you're kind of waiting for something to happen. It's kind of ominous.
Yeah, it's I think about directors who treat the camera as a character versus directors who treat the character as an omniscient, um, an uninvolved third party. And this film was kind of a combination of both of them. It's impersonal and increasingly personal as the film goes on. And I think that yeah, as you say, it develops such a tension and reaction as you're watching it. It was terrific. This film is based on your mom's own experiences doing this sort of work in the 90s. Going back to kind of your personal life, how does that sort of conversation between you and your mom about her experiences um, happen? And what's your reaction as she's telling you about these sorts of experiences?
Um, it was a surprise when she told me, because it was over the pandemic. We were just sitting down. I think it was like after a late night for her at work, and I just got back from school, and uh, we were sitting down, and I don't know how we were just talking about the past and what her like past work was like. And then out of nowhere, she was like, "Oh yeah, I used to be a crisis line operator in the '90s," and I was like, "What?" Kind of caught me off guard because she'd never brought it up before. So then I was more curious, and what that experience was like for her, why she did it, because she volunteered too, on top of it wasn't a paid gig or anything. She just volunteered on top of she was working so many jobs already. I was like, wow, so you did that on top of everything else. And we dove into a lot of her experiences with it. And most of the time I was just listening because I was kind of still aghast. Like I was caught off guard that, it felt like I was learning something completely new about my mom. Uh, and yeah, she just had a level of insight that I've not just into the crisis hotline world, that whole world, but also the people involved in it. I guess that shows because she was volunteering, right? It wasn't a paid gig, so she really was invested in helping these people, and that idea or that character, and one of the distinct experiences she had kind of influenced me to make this movie, and then that carried over when we were doing casting. We actually did look at seeing if we could find actors and actresses. My mom's never acted in anything before in her whole life, and I came to the realization that the best person for the role is just her, because she's the one who lived this experience, and if she's comfortable, and I can coax her into it, then I think it could be good. So yeah, that's how we also ended up casting my own mother in the part. And yeah, I think she did a really good job despite no acting experience.
I think she did a spectacular job, and I don't know if it was just because it was something that she could move back into, or just she has some talent, but I thought she was absolutely wonderful. And that's actually, my next question. What was it like for her to kind of go back into this mindset and into this time? And then also, I'm assuming that the voiceover from the caller was ADR'd afterwards. So were you feeding her lines on set? How was she receiving it, and how did that affect her performance?
So we actually had the actor who you hear in the actual film. He's on the line with her. She's actually on the phone with him during the whole thing. So whenever we ran a take, we'd have them both interacting. And initially, we actually did have the audio for him on set, but we ended up ADRing it afterwards. But yeah, so she actually did have that. I think that's another reason that she got to be a bit more comfortable on screen, and we weren't asking too much of a first-time actor, because though I'm sure she's capable of it. I mean, when I'm acting, I'd personally rather have another actor to interact with,
Right.
other than a director blurting out lines. So yeah, I just felt that it would lend to a more natural performance, and it would just be better for both actors if they could have that experience of actually talking with each other. So she was on the phone with Ted Charette the whole time, who was our other actor, and he did a fantastic job, and really let my mom be comfortable in the scene, and uncomfortable when need be, but in a safe way. She was very comfortable, and yeah, I think most of it was just that, though, was making sure she was comfortable and getting comfortable, because it was such a vulnerable and personal story. But I think most of her anxiety was actually just around not messing up. She was very worried about forgetting lines and ruining it for everyone, quote unquote. So I think that was more where her anxiety laid than in reliving this experience, because once you do it 8 or 9 times, I don't know if she was even really relating it to what happened to her, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
It's both classic mom behavior, who wants everything to go well, but also like, yeah, after take after take after take, it just stops
Yeah.
being the thing. So
Yeah.
so you filmed this during the pandemic. Talk a bit about the challenges that you experienced, putting together even a short film
Yeah.
during a time when it's hard to be together?
Yeah, I mean, this was in the I think we were still in lockdown when we shot this, and the crew was only me and two other people. It was my friend James Salmon and my other friend Andrew Balint. And we had one guy on sound, and the other guy was my DP, and that's how we ran with it. But again, I one of the reasons that I made this movie when I did too was the access and simplicity of it. I knew I had access to an office location that I could get for free. We just have to shoot at nights, which is fine. And then I knew that I wanted the whole thing to be one shot at the time. It was actually my DP on the day. He was like, I'll just set up a camera over here. Won't interrupt the shot, but we might use it. I was like, okay, sure, whatever. I don't even want to think about it. And then he ended up being right. But I will say that the pandemic kind of fed into the story because I wanted to keep it simple, right? Like the two main characters, they never actually interact face to face, which was a big thing back then. So we didn't have to have the actors with their masks off near each other. And yeah, we just try to keep it as safe as possible. Crew as small as possible. It was just me, two other guys, and the actors. So yeah, but I think in a way it's almost like it was like a blessing in disguise because it forced us to strip down, or at least forced me to strip down. So I don't know. It's kind of the butterfly effect, right? Like if I go back, I wonder if it wasn't the pandemic, if I would have, made this movie, and I wonder if I would have tried to make something a little too overcomplicated. Whereas I think this movie really taught me that simplicity is just better always.
And that, leads me to my next question. What's next for you, and how will your experiences on this film kind of affect you as a filmmaker moving forward?
Yeah, so I'm still at the film school at what was formerly known as Ryerson University. And so for me, I'm just building towards my thesis film, which is my last film at Ryerson. That's my focus right now. But I've actually directed 2 movies since Barbara. They're both in post right now. And I think what I learned most from Barbara was this sounds weird, but like a confidence in my visual approach, I guess. Because beforehand, I was kind of playing around with different stylistic decisions, but I always had an inkling towards, I always had the camera locked off. I always tried to keep the shots limited and not shoot too much coverage. And I think that's carried over, but I think it's just there's a level of confidence that I got from that movie that really helped with the other films in terms of visual approach and and also just working with actors because I'm a young guy, and I grew up without any acting experience really. I never went to any acting classes. I didn't have any drama experience. So coming into post high school world, I really felt like, okay, I can do this filmmaking stuff. I can learn all this right now at film school, but I didn't feel I was learning enough about acting and interacting with actors at the time. So it was really great to get that firsthand experience, not only with a seasoned actor like Ted Charette, but also an untrained actor like my mom, which I'd love to do more in the future. I've yet to do in these last 2 movies, but I'd love to work with more non-actors. So I think it lends to a more natural performance, but also it's I don't know, it's like the exciting thing about making movies is every time it's very different. And when you work with non-actors, I feel like it's so personal. You play into who they are as a person on screen, and it would just be a very interesting and different kind of relationship. I think which would be fun.
We had a discussion with one of our feature directors, KW Counselling, who directed the movie Cinema Havana, and he also cast non-actors in his major roles. And he said that it's that feeding of, I have a character on the page, and then I hire someone who has some lived experience, and they kind of come together, and you use what they are able to bring to the role from their own experiences, and then you bring what's in the script, and you create a performance together. Aiden, the film is absolutely terrific. It's going to be part of our Made in Canada shorts program throughout the entire duration of the festival. And we look very much forward to seeing what comes next from you. So please do keep in touch, and hopefully we'll see you at GRFF again, and hopefully in the future we'll see you in person.
Yeah, hopefully in the future I'll see you in person too. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for talking with us today. Jackie, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today.
Yes, great. Thanks for having me.
So let's start off by talking a bit about what KW Counselling Services does and the work that you do in the community.
Sure. So KW Counselling Services has been serving Waterloo Region for over 70 years now, offering individual, couples and partners and family counseling. In addition to our accessible mental health services, we also offer parenting education and supports through Parenting Now, specialized services, including counseling and youth groups for 2S LGBTQIA+ folks through OK to Be Me. And we support those who have experienced intimate partner violence through our Strong Mom, Safe Kids program. So we have a lot of different things we do in the community, as well as our counseling services.
And very important services as well. I think it's safe to say that everyone has experienced some form of mental health crisis over the past 2 years to various degrees. And maybe, you know, maybe some of us don't recognize that we're having those crises, or we don't think that we're you know, in a bad enough state that we need to talk to anybody about it. What's the value in seeking out counseling?
Yeah, so these past couple of years have been especially challenging for a lot of folks in a lot of different ways. And isolation has been a big part of that, right? So counseling can be valuable in a number of ways. Sometimes just talking things through or saying them out loud is all we need to get some clarity. It can be a way to get some guidance or gain tools to help us communicate. Sometimes just another perspective is invaluable. Counseling can also be much more than someone to talk to, though. Our therapists are trained and experienced in the field of mental health, so they can offer tools and strategies to help. So, and if you think about like talking with, you know, a friend or a family member, sometimes it's almost like they're doing us a favor, or we're expecting more kind of back and forth, right? When you're going to a therapist or a counselor, like that's your time, right? So there's no feeling like you're imposing on someone or you know, maybe being a burden or something. It gives that kind of, it lightens that part of the aspect of it too. So I think counseling is something that anyone can use. Like we can all use it at whatever stage we're at, whether it's simply someone to talk to or we really, really need some tools to help us work things through, right? Kind of same with our physical health, right? Like our physical health, we can use, you know, help in different ways and to different degrees.
I know when I've sought counseling, it's exactly for the reasons you say. I'm looking for an impartial third party who has no emotional connection to me, and so as I'm talking about things, they don't have any bias that's coming into the situation. It's interesting that you mentioned, you know, physical health. You know, we're all, for better or worse, you know, gym culture and workout culture and taking care of ourselves is something that's very accepted in society. And I feel like over the last 10 years, especially, mental health has become something that we're much more comfortable talking about in public. You know, growing up, sitcoms, so, you know, oh, you're seeing a shrink was kind of a joke,
right?
But now not so much. I think if you saw that sort of joke in a movie or a TV show, it would kind of, you know, rub you a little weird. You're like, no, all right, calm down. But suicide is still considered a very taboo topic. It's not something that we talk openly about. How can we change that? And maybe another way to ask that is, why do you think the conversation about mental health has changed so dramatically and become so much more accepted?
Yeah, I think we are kind of moving to a culture where we are more vulnerable about things in general, like more things that were taboo or were kept inside the family or inside the four walls of the household are kind of being talked about more, right? We realize that those supports are valuable. As far as moving the conversation forward or keeping that momentum going, an important part is simply to keep talking about it. One of the biggest ways to fight stigma and shame and taboo is to shine a light on those things. So looking at mental health and suicide, the way we look at first aid is a good step, right? When people learn what they can do, how they can help, when they become more empowered, right? So knowing what to do and where to go before you or a loved one is in need, it helps us feel more confident too. So preparing beforehand is valuable. So you're not at that state, you're not in crisis when you're trying to figure out something. Like, we hope we never need to use first aid, right? But we feel better if we're trained in it. So it's the same kind of idea, like being trained in those kind of crisis moments or suicide prevention.
We're also, there's a lot of talk now about finding ways to move intervention away from police or intervention by force and more into maybe offensive forms of intervention with mental health professionals and social workers and that sort of thing. And I think personally, it seems to me like that's just a way to make your community better by being on the lookout for everybody's mental health. What are some of the tools or resources that people can make use of in their lives to see the signs of a loved one who might be in crisis?
So yeah, some of the tools or resources, the Waterloo Suicide Prevention Council has tools available that goes into much more detail about what people can do, including connecting them to resources such as counseling and hospital, so they're not alone. When you're being there for someone, like it's just, some of the biggest things is really first just to listen. Like, it seems simple, but it's really hard. Like you were talking about somebody being, in our lives, sometimes it is hard just to listen, right? And truly listen, not to fix or to downplay, but to truly listen, remaining accepting and non-judgmental, taking them seriously, and offering support and hope. Assure them, that they know help is available. It's always good to have people to talk to. Make sure they know you are there for them, even when they feel they're at their worst. So just having those lines of communication open, just kind of checking in on each other and being there. But yeah, the Waterloo Suicide Prevention Council is a great place to go for those deeper resources than we can get into in an interview.
It's terrific, and it's great that we have those sorts of resources in the community. One of our films in the festival, Barbara, is a short film about a crisis line volunteer that gets just about the most worst case scenario call. From a counseling perspective, how important are crisis lines, and is this kind of a worst case scenario, what's presented in the film?
Right. So yeah, so first of all, crisis lines are a really important part of mental health supports. People need to be able to reach out 24 hours a day, anytime, right, from where they are, just to be able to pick up a phone or call or text or even chat online, right, whatever people need in the moment. It's help when you really need it. Because how many of us have been there, just with our thoughts at 2 a.m, right? Like, when the light of day, maybe you can brush it off a little bit, but you need help when you need it. So it's there at any time. Counseling sessions and many other supports are things that are mainly scheduled in advance, right? So like in this film, this wouldn't have been a scenario where the caller could have just booked a future session, right? They needed help right then and right there. So, and having said that, yes, this is pretty much a worst case scenario. Although Barbara in the film was able to be there for the caller in the way the caller seemed to want, there was still a feeling of helplessness, right, that we could really feel when we're watching. So when people are ideating like that, we want to move them towards safety and work to de-escalate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of our most affecting films, in part
Mhm.
because we know nothing about the caller. Barbara's the only one on screen. All we know about the caller is what they reveal on the call. It's over a telephone. It's very, very raw and somewhat resigned in the delivery. Would you say that
Mhm.
this is a portrayal that is reflective of someone in crisis?
Yeah, well, quite often, crisis lines hear from people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts. So, as I said, like the goal is to de-escalate and work with the caller to create that safety plan or work through a safety plan that they may already have. Right? The call itself to a crisis line may be part of a safety plan that someone has in place already. So they reach out not to hurt themselves. To me, this film, this portrayal sounds like an unfortunate, more rare scenario,
Right.
where it's kind of like the caller didn't want to give any information. There was, like I said, that feeling of helplessness, right? So there was really nothing more to be able to do in this case, where more often it's hopefully there's something that can kind of at least work towards a better ending to the call or the film,
Yeah.
or there's more going forward.
It's I spoke with the filmmaker, and this was based on an actual experience that his mother had as a crisis line operator in the 90s. And I can't imagine. I volunteer to help organize a film festival. I can't imagine what it would be like to volunteer to help people who are going through that level. And I think it speaks very highly of the sorts of people who do volunteer to do that work, and
Mhm.
they're to be commended.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just to pick up onto the next call right after that,
Yeah.
right? Like, and that's where kind of like the support of the people who are around the caller, like the workers, is important too, right? Because everybody's human in these scenarios, so it's important to support both ends of that situation. And thankfully in Waterloo Region, we do have like a variety of different ways people can, like if they're in crisis, there are a variety of crisis lines, or if they're having suicidal thoughts. So there's Here 24/7, which is named easily, right? So people
Right.
can go to it when they need it. So Here 24/7 does have a 24/7 crisis support line that actually spells out Here 24/7. So it's 844-437 844-437-3247. 911 is always an option if somebody doesn't have any other place to go or can't think of anything else. There's also ones for certain demographics. So there's the Kids Help Phone, there's the LGBT Youth Line, there's the Trans Lifeline, there's the Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region 24-hour line as well. And even places like KW Counselling Services do offer quick access appointments. So we can usually see people, say, the next day if they're in more urgent situations. So there's a variety of ways that people can reach out for help, but that step is in reaching out too.
Right. And we'll include links to those various organizations and their phone numbers in the information below. Are there any other resources that you'd like to let people be aware of for those who are experiencing mental health crisis, having suicidal thoughts, or just feel like they're getting to that point where they need to reach out and talk to somebody? Maybe they're not as far along and they're not as I'm going to use the word desperate, but maybe that's not the right word to use. But, people who are coming out of this period of isolation, people who feel like they need to alleviate themselves or work through some things. What are some other resources that are available here in our community?
Really think, like, from the ones that we've talked about, like leaning on friends and family, realizing that there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? To say, hey, I'm struggling. I've realized I'm struggling. What can we do? And to have those, to kind of create that safety list again, bringing it back to like our physical health or other emergency situations. How many of us have had emergency numbers on the side of the fridge, right? Like, here's fire, here's, those in advance. If you feel like somebody you know might be struggling, maybe create that for them, right? And just say, hey, like, this is just in case.
Right.
I'm here if you ever want to talk, and here's some other things you can reach out to if you don't feel comfortable talking to me, because that completely removed third party is sometimes what we need.
Right.
Right? Because it's embarrassing or for whatever reason, or you just don't want people to know, or some things you may not be ready to tell friends or family yet, and you can talk to somebody outside your circles, right? So
yeah, and like you said earlier, that just making it part of the conversation and being very open and accepting about it. I've been very open in my circle of saying, like, yeah, I've gone to counseling. I went to counseling fairly steadily. Every once in a while I go in just kind of for a checkup, the same as I go into the doctors once a year to get booster shots and to make sure that my cholesterol is low. I go in, I have a session with my counselor. And the number, in my friends and family group, and the number of other people who are then more comfortable saying, like, yeah, I saw a counselor during this period, or I've been thinking about it. What's your person like? And just having it be part of that everyday conversation, so that it is perhaps as casual a thing as we discuss as, hey, what movie did you see last weekend? That would be a great outcome. Jackie, thank you so much for taking this time and talking about these incredible services that are available here in Waterloo Region.
Yep. Bottom line to everybody is you're not alone.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.